Hello friends, the other Ben here from Motocamp Nerd, and today let's talk about how you can get this thing onto your motorcycle so you can sleep comfortably in the backcountry. A sleeping bag is an essential piece of motorcycle camping gear, and so it's important to understand all the different ways to get your sleeping bag to the place where you'd like to sleep in it. Most people know about the stuff sack method, which we'll cover, but there are two other ways that I think are lesser known that you can use to get your sleeping bag out to where you're going safely, comfortably, without getting it wet. And in fact, you can use it as kind of a dual purpose item to keep things inside your pannier from moving around on you. First things first, the stuff sack method. This is too big. This is a whole pannier easily. You gotta find a way to make this a little bit more compact. Now, admittedly, this is my Diamond Park Zero. This is a very big bag, but it's a down bag, and so I wanted to use this one for this demonstration so you can see just how much down could be compressed. Now you want to store these sleeping bags loosely, like this. That's why it comes with this sack. Hang it up if you can. You don't want to leave them compressed for long periods of time because the down will eventually lose its loft. But while you're traveling, for a day or two here or there, it's not a big deal. So let me just show you how we turn this into a smudge. Let me just show you how we turn this massive bulk into a smaller, much more manageable size that can then be easily placed in a pannier or backpack, wherever you want to put it. First, take the bag out. This is a Sea to Summit waterproof stuff sack, which Motocamp Nerd sells, so you should check that out. It's called a stuff sack because you just stuff the bag in there. There's no real, super technique here. You just shove it in. I'll link all this for you in the description if you want to check out this stuff sack in particular. I like this one a lot. It's pretty sturdy too, so you don't have to worry about ripping it and stuff. Anyway, stuff the bag in, and already it's quite a bit smaller, as you can see. Now, we're just gonna close this, roll the top down, rolled over 3 times. I'm gonna clip this so that it stays closed. It's already kind of crooked on me. But look, much smaller, right? That right there could go in the pannier, but we can make it even smaller. This is a compression sack, and it's called that because it will compress the bag, obviously. Funny thing, this is the same E-vent liner that's used in the MSR riding gear. Okay, and then just tighten it down relatively evenly. Don't go too far on one side at a time, because the goal here is to compress the sleeping bag using the compression sack. They also make compression sacks that tighten around. They call that a guillotine style. But most generally, you're gonna see a compression sack like this that just allows you to compact down whatever you put inside lengthwise. All right, I could go a little farther, but it's not gonna get much smaller. It just starts to expand out. But that is a much smaller package. So that is a giant 0-degree sleeping bag down to the size of, let's call it a basketball. And I can just pop it into my pannier. This is a perfectly acceptable way of packing a sleeping bag, and probably the most common, most popular. But as you can see, there is one downside. It takes up a lot of space in your pannier, even compacted. And this is a big pannier. This is like a 50-liter pannier. It's the giant loop around the world. So what if I told you there's a way to more efficiently utilize the bulk of your sleeping bag and get more gear in to this pannier and keep all the gear from moving around when you don't want it to? Well, there is. So stuff sack, great option, very popular option, probably the one most people know about. But there are 2 other ways that you can pack a sleeping bag on a motorcycle that are pretty common that you might want to consider. The next one also utilizes the pannier, but we're ditching the stuff sack. What? Yeah, we don't need it. We're not going to take it. We'll put the sleeping bag back out. And the idea here is simple. You put your gear, whatever you're trying to carry inside your pannier, tent. Got my jet boil in here. And we're just gonna stuff the sleeping bag in to the pannier on its own. There's a couple advantages to this. One, it allows your sleeping bag to conform to whatever's inside your pannier. So you can use this space more efficiently rather than just having one big ball that takes up a bunch of space and there's kind of dead space around it because it's hard to compact it any more than it is when it's already in that stuff sack. 2, it's gonna keep everything inside your pannier from moving around when you're riding on tough terrain. And if you were to drop the bike on the side where the sleeping bag is, it's also gonna cushion all of those things and keep them maybe from getting crushed by the weight of the bike. So let's stuff this in here. I'll show you what I mean. I'm just gonna stuff it in as if the pannier was a giant stuff sack. This is a big bag for this too, so bear with me. And this would work with a quilt or anything, any part of your sleep system that's compactable. Basically whatever you sleep in, generally this will work with. But look, I can put my jet boil in there, make some room for my sleeping pad. So you kind of get the idea. And the cool thing about this method is I can then close up the pannier, like always, right? And then I use the straps over the top here to compress the whole bag. Instead of a separate compression sack, the giant pannier becomes my compression sack, and everything in there is really secure, and I'm able to get it down to a smaller size. And there's lots of room then to stuff in smaller items in and around, like your mattress pump or a bag meal or whatever you want to stick in there around it. Gives you a lot of flexibility with how you use the space when you just stuff it in the pannier. And speaking of not using a stuff sack and just stuffing the sleeping bag in a bag, that brings me to option number 3. Option number 3, skip the pannier entirely and use a waterproof dry bag, like this Giant Loop Rogue, as your stuff sack for your sleeping bag. There are a lot of advantages here. Frees up the room in your pannier. One of the biggest things in your kit is probably your sleeping bag. So getting it out of the pannier gives you a lot more room in your pannier. The other big advantage is that the sleeping bag is not heavy. It's bulky, but it's not heavy. And when you're riding off-road, or really in general, with gear, you want to get the heaviest gear as low on the bike as possible so that it's not making the bike top heavy when it tips. So getting the sleeping bag out lets you put your heavier gear into the panniers and puts the lightest thing, which is your sleeping bag, in this bag on top of the bike. Another advantage is your sleeping bag is separate from everything else. So if you have like a wet, nasty tent and you don't want to put it in the same bag with your sleeping bag is separate, protected. Your sleeping bag is easy to just take off the bike and put back on quickly and easily when you're setting up camp. You know right where it is. It's right on top. And you know your sleeping bag is protected no matter what. Now, waterproof panniers obviously are going to protect your sleeping bag. A waterproof stuff sack is another layer of protection. But this, just sitting on top, knowing that your sleeping bag is just in a dry bag, fantastic. And you can compact it down with the straps on the bag or the straps that you're using to secure the bag to your motorcycle. So let's just stuff it in here. The stuffing in the bag technique also works for tents. You don't have to put your tent in the bag. You can just stuff it into your pannier and use it to secure everything. Just be careful you're not getting it close to any sharp things that could rip holes in your tent. And obviously you're going to want to take the poles out when you do it that way. By the way, there's a right way to roll down the ends of dry bags. Did you know that? You always want it to go downward on the motorcycle, so towards the bottom of the bike, towards the ground, because then water won't pool in these areas. If this is up, water can pool in there and sometimes get in. But if you roll it this way with the gap down, that won't happen. There you go. It's about the same size, maybe a little bigger as the stuff sack was, although I haven't even compacted it or tried to, which I can do with these side handles. But you've got a separate bespoke carrying case for your sleeping bag. Keep the light item high on your bike. You can get it on and off quickly and easily. I usually use a couple of Giant Loop pronghorn straps to secure this to the bike, compress it down with that. But I really like this method too, because frankly, when I'm packing my panniers, a sleeping bag is always the biggest pain in the ass. So I actually like having it out and separate and just knowing that I won't have to deal with it. So those are 3 excellent methods for taking a sleeping bag with you on a motorcycle. Which one do you prefer, and had you heard of all 3? Please let us know in the comments. Don't forget that Motocamp Nerd is the world's first and only website devoted 100% to the needs of motorcycle campers. Every item on the site has been tested and vetted thoroughly by motorcycle campers like me and other Ben, and Ben is committed to only carrying the highest quality stuff that's going to last you a long time, and it's good value for the price. He has great taste in gear, except he sometimes sells merchandise from weird YouTubers. Anyway, Motocamp Nerd has all the gear you need so you can pack small and camp easy.